Welcome, Tangle friends. My name is Annie Reiser. I'm a certified Zentangle teacher and a certified botanical illustrator. Thanks for joining me today for another of my Lunchtime Tangles. We are not going to tangle this time. I have had many requests from people who've been watching my tutorials on how do I create my colored backgrounds. And I know you can tell that I like to use them because I use them all the time in my demonstrations. I really love the way the colors kind of dictate to me what to do and where to place things, and really kind of helps me compositionally. So here's an example of one of my latest polygons that I do a series of. This is my fourth one, I believe. No, fifth one. And I decided to do this one in a color manner different than the others, and it might turn into a class. It might be part of a book I'm going to make, but this is a purely watercolored background. I Zentangled over the top of it, and then I shaded it with my colored pencils. So this is the effect that we're going for. So I thought today I would show you one of the ways that I do this. I have actually several, but today we're going to talk about using Lindy's magical shakers. These are pigments. They're actually dye pigments, very brilliant, very permanent, and super messy. So when you're doing this on your own, make sure you have an apron on and lots of paper towels around and water, and just doing this in a place that you don't mind getting messy with. So today I have here what we're going to be using. I am working on this craft mat here. It's just called a craft mat. You can Google it and get all kinds out there. I don't know where I got mine. I can't remember. I do know that the Tim Holtz team has craft mats, and I'm pretty sure Lindy's gang, where I got these, probably have them as well. So you can also just use a plastic underlay of something that you have at home, one of those cheap plastic tablecloths, or even a plastic bag, a baggie that you cut open. You can use that. Yeah, so let's get started. I am going to, first of all, let you know that Lindy's magical shakers are wonderful and I love them, but I am not being sponsored by them in any way. I just really do like them, and I know there's other products out there similar, and I haven't tried them all, but I do know these work really, really well. And the very good thing about these is that when you color your backgrounds with the dyes, and maybe you're making a string for your tangles or your tile or anything, you can erase till the cows come home. It will not lift that color off like a watercolor base can do. So I really like them for the Zentangling if I need to erase my string or anything else. The vibrancy, the brilliant color stays, whereas sometimes watercolors seem to fade. So this is one of my ways of making colored backgrounds. I'm going to start with, of course, I have my water, and I have this is a number 6 brush. It's a round barreled brush, and I like to have an array of little sponges for lifting and dabbing and making different textures on my surface. I have here a bunch of different tiles to work on. I have a Zentangle, I have regular Zentangle tile, I have some Arches 140-pound hot press watercolor paper, and I wanted to tell you I have also here a cold press watercolor paper. And people ask me all the time, what's the difference between hot press and cold press? And it is just that. In the paper making process at the end, when the paper is rolled out and all the moisture is pressed from it, it can be done hot or cold, and the hot press is going to yield a surface that's quite smooth. This one's actually a printmaking paper. This is Fabriano Tiepolo, I believe, which is actually a printmaking paper, and it's wonderful to do these colors on. But you can see this is a hot press watercolor paper. Very, very smooth surface, almost like a Bristol vellum. Whereas this is a cold press, and it has some texture, some bumps. And you can do this also on the cold press watercolor paper, but my end result will be using a fine, you know, the finer tipped markers and pens are harder to work with on this surface. So that's why I usually use hot press watercolor paper. Here is one example, however, of a cold press watercolor wet in wet, which is beautiful, and I can still draw on that. But in general, I prefer the hot press. Okay, so let's get started. Just like wet in wet watercolor, there's a couple different ways that you can do the Lindys. And what I'm going to do first is show you the shaker, which is this little, the Lindy's dies are actually powders. They come in these shakers that look a lot like our spice jars. On the one side we have a perforated opening so that you can just shake small amounts. Then on this side there's a larger opening, and that is where you can, for example, shake into a palette, let's say a little color palette, and then add water and mix that up and use it as a watercolor, right? And we might do that here later as a demo too. But I'm gonna start, you can either start on dry or you can start on wet. And I like to start on wet because it just seems to work better for me. But I encourage you to experiment with all kinds of different papers and all kinds of different ways to apply these magical shaker pigments. So here I sprayed, and if you want, you can take your paintbrush and, you know, smooth it out. That'll give it a whole different look from if you just left the beaded water on it. Let's take something that's colorful so you can really see it on camera. I've got my red, and the colors are so beautifully named. They're just fun in themselves. This one is called Cuckoo Clock Cardinal. So I'm going to take Cuckoo Clock Cardinal, and I'm just going to sprinkle that on and show you what happens. It's reacting with the water, and it's spreading beautifully. And if you hit it up again with more water, you can make these kind of run and just experiment with that. If you get clumps, you can kind of break them up with a watercolor brush, because the powders do tend to sort of clump. And I'm going to go and use another color. Let's do the yodeling yellow. Just go right over what's there. So the yellow and the red will make an orange, right? And then you can hit it back up with some water. I'm just using a old bottle that I got at the grocery store of the veggie wash here. There's all kinds of really fine mist bottles out there that you can purchase that are artist grade, but this works just fine. I'm liking that already quite a lot. Let's see, maybe I'll add a little bit of orange. Oh, I know what I'm going to add. The gold. This is lovely. This will add sparkle to everything. Glittering gold. There are a couple of different glittering ones out there in Lindy's line. So I'm just going to add that. Spritz again. And that's clumping quite a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of break those up. And you don't see that so well. Maybe on camera I'll pick this up and then maybe you'll be able to see the shimmer. It's just brilliant. Let's look. Can't really see that super well. But that's going to make, and then you can let it run. You can smooth out your edges here if you don't want any white space. You can leave white space. You can also take a paper towel and just daub or your sponge to make it have like this kind of mottled look. So I've got that one going, and I'm going to just set that aside to dry. And I'm going to wipe my craft mat down. These craft mats are great because they are very smooth and you can wipe them down. You can also do this directly on the craft mat if you'd like. For example, I could just do a little bit of shaking directly on the mat here. I'm going to go ahead and spray first because the powder tends to go everywhere, and this way you can kind of see what you're getting to. So I'm going to spray my craft mat, just sprinkle a little bit of the Lindy's on here. I'm going to do orange. This is orange. This one is Oktoberfest orange, and that was Guten Tag Teal. I love that it's German. You know, I spent like 12 years living in Germany. My husband's German. I taught German at the university. I just love German. And so it was a wonderful surprise to see the names on these. And so you can just take, for example, that as it is, and a dry tile or piece of paper, and then just press that down and lift it up. And that's going to give you yet another look. That's very pretty, I have to say. Not sure I like the pooling here, so I'm just going to dab that up. So there's a really pretty, and I really like these little speckles of white showing through. If you don't like the pooling here of the ink, you can break that up. You can add a little water and let it run to get the effects that you want. Really fun. Everyone is different, and you really don't have a lot of control over this. I don't want to waste that, so I'm going to go ahead and just add another layer of a color. And I'm going to add gold, of course, because you can never go wrong with gold. They have a clear shimmer as well, I believe. I'll do a little bit of red. Just a very tiny amount is enough. As you can see, this already yields a lot. So this is getting, and then you can play around with the amount of water that you want to put on there. And you can also, you could take your brush and just swirl this around to get another look. But I'm going to try my Zentangle on this. Beautiful. How fun is that? Just stop off these edges. And I just like all of this unintentional, serendipitous breaking of the color. It's so much fun because you really can't control it. I'm going to just leave that up there. I do like to wipe these edges so they don't pool and make mud. So the other thing that you can do with these Lindy shakers is take, like I said, a palette for mixing paint, and just drop a little bit of water in there, and use the larger side of your shaker, right? This is the side that we can kind of tap out larger amounts of the dye powder, and you can mix it up just as you would watercolor. So there's one, and you can make it as concentrated as you want. You can make it, you know, that is by however much water you add to the mixture. I'm going to do a few so that I can show you a wet and wet technique. So here you see I've mixed up a few of the paints that I'm going to use, and I'm going to start a wet and wet process in which, of course, I'm going to wet down my paper first. It's pretty heavily wetted, and then I'm just going to take some blue and dab it on. Maybe take some purple. Here's that beautiful pink. And you can just let the water run and guide your color. You can use your brush to kind of move it around. You can get it really wet and pick it up and just kind of sort of try to control it. So that's called wet and wet. And then you can use this or a little sponge. There's also all kinds of ways to make textures on wet and wet watercolor. I do actually a whole 3-hour class, or half a day class, I think, in how to do that. And when I'm doing actual wet on wet watercolor, I do it on these large sheets, you know, the large sheets that you buy from the art store that are like 32 by 24. And I just do a whole sheet, and when it's dry, I cut them up. And that's even more fun because then you get other looks that you weren't expecting. I'm going to put a little more down here. So that's a pretty one. This time I'm going to show you what I mean. I'm going to take my brush and sort of mix around here. So I have a larger blobs. And I'm going to press my paper. Pull it up. One of the things that I do when I start doing these colored backgrounds, I just get a bunch of paper out and do a whole bunch of them at once because, as you can see, it's pretty messy. So when you have this all out, you might as well just do several of them at once. Look how pretty that is turning out. Maybe some darker blue over here. You do have to be careful, you know, I think you saw there a minute ago, I made some mud. If you get certain colors mixing together, the primary colors, when mixed together will create brown or black. So you have to be careful about that. Wow, this one's going to be really beautiful. And then this will dictate our colored pencil shading once we have our tangles done, and that's what makes, I think, the piece most interesting. So now I'm just letting it kind of dab up the extra moisture so that it'll dry faster. There's this thing we do in Zentangle called map tangling, and Nancy, my friend Nancy Domnauer, CZT, teaches that a lot online. And so they take these surfaces of just broken color and just leave the rest of it white and just tangle within this area, which is a really fun look. Just going to make this one a little more prominent. We'll see, little heart. Looks like fireworks, right? Let's make these into fireworks with some yellow, bright yellow, and some gold sparkle. Then you can also obviously take your brush and make little sprinkles with your watercolor on top for another added layer of texture. I can show you that in a minute. I do like to break up the powdered gold so that it spreads throughout and it becomes almost like this little gold glaze on top of all. It's so beautiful. You can't really see it well on camera, but it's just stunning in real life. But look at those colors. Look how vibrant they are. I'm just working this a little bit with my brush, breaking up some of those clumps. You can leave the clumps too. They add another level of interest. I think I'm going to hit it one more time, just make it really kind of dreamy. Not so many hard edges. Here's my tile. Spritz it with water. Let's do something in greens. We haven't done green yet. Green and yellow are always great together. Gold. And the orange is called Oktoberfest orange. So to add some of those little spritzers, like I said, you just get your brush pretty wet and just tap. You can actually get another brush and tap it with that, and it usually gives you a little bit more control on the size of your spritzers. So that just adds another layer of interest. This could use a little more green. So just play around with picking up the paint, adding more to it until you get your desired look. I love to see how the almost like frost blossoms happen on this spritzed paper. So let's do that. Let's just let it work its own magic. Okay, here we go. I'm going to do it with red. You can also do a very simple and plain one if you don't want to have a very screamingly busy background. I like to do just simple tone in tone that doesn't have much pattern but is more just a plain watercolored background with a little bit of modeling. So that I would then kind of really spread out with my paintbrush. Isn't that beautiful how this area turned out really pretty? So this is on the cold press watercolor paper. You can see the texture, right? So it can really take a beating. You can really add a lot of water to this and a lot of pigment and even layer it up if you need to. So that is the advantage of the cold press. But you won't get really, really fine lines without getting bumpy and wiggly with your pen if you use cold press. Here's the other cold press I did, but I kind of really like sometimes leaving the white space or the negative space, and then in here you could do your tangling, or all over. It doesn't really matter. It just gives us another point of focal point and a way to kind of like guide our composition, right? Okay, I think I have covered pretty much everything. I am going to go ahead and do a few more and we will call it a day. And next time I'll teach you a different technique. So in this one I wanted to show you the shimmer, and I think if I hold it just right, you can see the gold shimmering. It's really fun. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. So I've run out of paper. I think we're going to call it quits for today, and I'm going to clean up my mess, and I'm going to have fun tangling on all these beautiful colored backgrounds. I did want to mention one more thing. If your paper ends up curling, which it does sometimes, it's very easy to make your tile flat again by just, let's say that this was curling up. You would just spray the back with water again, wipe it with the sponge so it's just a little damp, and then weight it under books. And you can put wax paper on top or paper towels. The wax paper will let it dry slower, but it won't stick if you're putting several pieces together. So that's one way to get your tile flat again. Thanks again for joining me today. Have a lot of fun with this, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. That's it for today's Tangle. Thanks for joining me. If you like these lunchtime tutorials, please give them a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I also invite you to check out my website for classes that I have scheduled or to purchase my Tangle tags for your favorite step outs. That's bowtangle.net. I'm leaving you with some other links too. Zentangle.com, where you can learn more about the Zentangle method from its founders, Rick Roberts and Maria Thomas. You can also visit their store there for a multitude of Zentangle paper tiles, tools, books, and kits. Tanglepatterns.com is that site I talk about where you can explore hundreds of tangle patterns, read about them, and get the step out, which is basically the deconstruction of the pattern. And finally, if you'd like to share your beautiful results with me and my student community, please join Annie's Bowtangle Alumni Facebook page. We're a private group where we inspire each other with our work and offer tips and useful information about art and Zentangle.